Wild Health is about optimizing you. We use genomics, blood work, biometrics, microbiome assessment, many other tests, and a conversation with you to come up with a full health optimization plan. What's the perfect diet, exercise, and supplement plan for you and only you? The Wild Health podcast is about optimizing all of us. Here we cover the cutting-edge science that gives you the base to be able to apply the personalized plan we give you as a patient. To sign up as a patient, go to wildhealth.com. Or if you're a physician or health coach and you want to learn how to do this for your patients, we're happy to help as well. Wildhealth.com for all the information on becoming a patient or working with us.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Wild Health Podcast. Mike Mallin here with you today. Today, we're going to talk about managing health anxiety. We want to talk a little bit about dealing with information overload when it comes to your health information and trying to find some sort of balance. There's so much information out there, and we're part of the problem. Admittedly, Wild Health is part of the problem. We overload our patients with all the data that they ever thought they wanted about their health and probably more. And sometimes that leads to health anxiety. So to help us figure this whole thing out is someone who deals with this on a daily basis, someone who's in the weeds, Steve Weatherholt, one of our illustrious health coaches here at Wild Health. Thanks for coming on the podcast and for tackling this problem with us.
Yeah, Mike, happy to be here. Thanks for having me. And while we're potentially part of the problem, I agree. I think we're also part of the solution. I think that's where coaching comes in heavy and hot. I was talking with you a little bit before, but the health coaches, we see this all the time. And so while it is something that we can provide information overload, I think that we can also help sift through the weeds and trim it up a little bit and help people kind of figure out what to do and what direction to move. And so I think that is the advantage of this type of healthcare too.
100%. I want to dive deep into that. Before we get into the weeds of all the health information, though, tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us some background on who Steve is and where you came from, what you're interested in.
Yeah, I've been part of the health coaching team now for just about 2 years. And I actually came out of the education world. So I was a teacher for 10 years. It was what I grew up wanting to do. I literally achieved everything I wanted growing up. Was like, hey, I'm going to teach high school physical education. I'm going to coach basketball. And it's going to be great. And it was great. And I loved every second of it. But as I was doing that, I also was working at a CrossFit gym as a coach, doing some personal training and seeing people. It was funny, like in my 20s, seeing people get results. To me, it was all about body composition and weight loss and looking a certain way. And I'll never forget the day one of my clients told me that he went to his doctor and they pulled him off his insulin medication and some blood pressure medication. And I was like, why would he do that? I don't understand. And he's like, whoa, we got healthy. Like you told me to eat this way. I exercised. I lost a bunch of weight and I don't have these problems anymore. And I'm like, what? You can do that? And so I really kind of started diving into the science behind things and understanding, exercise and food as medicine and all those sorts of things and just spiraling down the rabbit hole, which is some of what we'll talk about today is you can go down too many rabbit holes. But that led me to stumble across Wild Health. And there were some openings for health coaches. And as my wife was sleeping on the couch one night, I was up filling out an application like, wonder if she's going to be mad about this. And I was like, I'll never get offered this job. And here we are. Changed my career and I couldn't be happier.
That's great, man. Well, we're stoked to have you on the team. You've been an asset to us for sure. All right, well, let's do this. What's the best way to let's imagine a scenario. So I'm a patient and I just met with my healthcare team. I just got my DNA and my labs back, and you guys handed me a 70-page long report with small font with all these words that I don't understand. And there was something about dementia risk and cardiovascular disease risk. And I'm now convinced that I'm going to die tomorrow. This, by the way, is like, this sounds ludicrous, but this is exactly what so many people go through. And anyone who's listening who went to medical school or nursing school or any health education school of any sort knows for a fact that, they have at some point had every disease known to man. Because that's right. Our natural human behavior to just assume that all of these things are happening to us, and anxiety takes over, and it's reality. So how do you approach this patient, Steve, who, they're overwhelmed. They've been drinking from the fire hose and they feel like they got everything wrong with them. And what's your approach here?
Yeah. So rather than approach the first call after that initial medical consult where they get the big packet of DNA and blood work, rather than approach it with my agenda, I like to start by asking them, what were your big takeaways? Tell me 3 things that you learned. And you can immediately see, I have the doctor's notes in front of me and I'm thinking about what they talked about, but what is this person actually taking away from this? And then the other thing I really like to frame for them is, look, this health report is not the answer to all things. It's sort of like a map, right? And nobody reads maps anymore. I mean, I use my phone to go everywhere. But if you were to read a map, there's multiple ways to get somewhere, right? It's not just one straight line. And the health report's kind of like that. Your data's kind of like that. It's like, okay, it gives us some options. And then our job together as the 3 of us, the doctor, the coach, the patient, is to work together to figure that out. And that's not going to look the same every time. And I always frame it too, like, look, we're not always going to get it right too. Like, this is a cohesive relationship. I want you to participate in this relationship as much as you can and help guide us as we go with feedback. Hey, that's working. That's not. This fits into my life. This doesn't. So much of it for patients is just going to be analyzing what is actually going to work for your lifestyle. Like, maybe we want you to not eat super late at night, but you have a job where that situation doesn't really work out appropriately. And so how can we come to an agreement or a strategy that is advantageous to your goals and also fits into your lifestyle? So I think some of it is just how you frame it with them, and then also really just trying to let them lead the way initially.
Yeah, I think it's so easy to, especially, and I want to talk about this a little bit too. I think I painted a bad picture of Wild Health there for a second, just talking about how we're information overload. But we try really hard to not overload our patients as much as we can. Although it still happens, and a lot of it happens external to the care that they're receiving from Wild Health. You read things online, your Instagram feed, like for a fact that if you eat 3 hours before you go to bed, you are going to die immediately.
It's over. It's over.
Right?
I will never sleep.
You're dead. Right? Yeah. So the reality is, there's so much dogma out there. There's so much black and white, and in reality, that's not how we live our lives, and that's not how health actually works. You eat right before you go to bed, or you get 4 hours of sleep one night, like, you're going to be okay. Like, everything's going to be okay. How do you break that barrier to the patients? Like, what do you use as your tools in your tool belt to get them past this idea of black and white or dogma in healthcare?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's helpful just to relate to them a little bit and tell them a little bit about the things I experience. Framing the health report as something that, rather than brings anxiety, should take it away, because maybe, while it may tell you some things that you have increased risk factors for, or whatever the case might be, we also are here to help provide answers to work on those things, right? And so I think that in and of itself is part of that conversation, is just making sure to work through the situations that they're concerned about, and then starting to create an action plan to tackle some of those things. And then, outside noise is everywhere, right? If you follow everything you read on the internet, you're just never going to eat food, because it's all bad, apparently, right? And so I think relating to them on that front is like, well, talk to me about what has worked well for you in the past. Where have you been successful at some point with any of these things? And let's start to chip away at that and incorporate maybe things in your nutrition, if that's what we're talking about, that you like. And then talking about some of the things that we do need to pay attention to, but the other thing is, like, I think it's really important for people to understand, and this was something I realized, is you can get really caught up in wanting to do everything so perfectly, because maybe that's your perceived perception of the only way it's going to work. But I remember we went on a vacation this past summer, and I use an HRV tracker to track HRV on a regular basis. So I'm kind of aware of, what things impact my stress levels and impact my sleep and all of this different stuff, which is cool. And that in and of itself is a rabbit hole we could go down about health anxiety. But what I noticed was, I went on this vacation. We were at the beach. We're outside a lot. I'm not eating optimally, definitely sleeping somewhat optimally, but maybe not at the times I would normally do. And certainly maybe having a little more alcohol than I normally would. And my HRV came back every morning higher than it normally would, like better. Mm-hmm. And you look at this and like, this doesn't make any sense. But the reality is, what I realized in that moment is that I was with people I love, doing something I love, in a very relaxed state. And I think that's where you can realize that, yeah, nutrition is important. Exercise is important. All these things are important. But sometimes the big levers are the connections and the things that we're doing that we're enjoying in life. And you can, no one ever stressed their way to optimal results, right? Like, you didn't stress your way out of diabetes. You didn't stress your way to weight loss. Like, you have to enjoy life as well. And so it taught me a lesson, and I'll explain this to people, that realizing and enjoying things in life can also move you towards your goals just as much as the other things.
How much harm do you think that we're doing by over focusing on data or these regimented goals that we've created for ourselves around our own health? I mean, this is prevalent in society today.
Yeah. I mean, I think that definitely is person dependent. There's definitely some people just who may know their personality or learn or will kind of pick up through this process that data is not a great thing for them, and I think that's where leaning specifically on blood work is maybe a positive thing because that doesn't lie, right? And there may be some clear things like we don't just want to ignore somebody's blood sugar that's getting dangerously high and encourage them to go eat cake and sugar, right? But at the same time, it's really important to pay attention to things like wearables and things that are just giving them too many inputs and too much data that creates sleep anxiety or creates more stress around these things. And I think one of the things and tools that I like to use with patients and have done with myself is to turn it off for a bit and just subjectively ask yourself how you feel things are going with your sleep or with your diet or whatever. Stop tracking food for a bit and just analyze those things subjectively and make sure that the device or the wearable or the data that you're inputting isn't completely controlling you, because it can be something that can consume you. Whoop has a nice feature that you can actually turn it off and it will still track you and give you the data whenever you turn it back on. And so I did an experiment for a couple of days where I just shut it off and did about my normal routine and lived life the way I did. Couldn't look at it because it wouldn't give me the data until I turned that back on. And then you go backtrack those things. And that was some of the best sleep, low stress things that I experienced, because you're not getting this objective marker that could cause some stress occasionally. So I think there's value, but it can be something where if you start to notice it's controlling you, or you're all of a sudden you have sleep disruptions and you never did, it's time to take a look at that. And we do a lot in our coaching sessions, just trying to figure out if people are experiencing that and then talking them through that on a real level.
Yeah, it's an interesting problem. It's like, you're a teacher, you're an educator, so you understand the value in showing somebody, pretty immediate feedback, right? Like, you do this and then your sleep does this, right? You're getting that objective data. You're getting feedback to how you lived your life yesterday, to whether you ate before you went to bed or whether you drank alcohol, all these things, immediate feedback, right? But then once the education's done, are you still getting important feedback, right? Like there's then it becomes this balancing act between, keeping you honest and just like overwhelming you and modifying your subjective sensation with the objective data, right? So it's like, I might wake up, have had a, what I thought was a decent night of sleep. I feel pretty good. I walk in, grab my coffee, and I'm looking at my sleep data from last night. Oh crap, my HRV was down. My resting heart rate was up. I was up in the middle of the night for an hour and a half. I don't remember being up in the middle of the night for an hour and a half. That's weird. Next thing you know, I'm like thinking about, I guess I can't work out today. And I probably should try to take a nap later. Yep. And maybe I should cancel that meeting. It's amazing how we let these objective data points seep into our daily lives and our subjective sense of well-being and just completely destroy it. Right. And that can happen now I know we're just talking about biometrics at this point, and there's a lot of other stuff to talk about here, but I think this is a really interesting aspect, because there's a bit of a diminishing return over time, as once you get over that hump of education and understanding how your body works and how it responds to insults, then you start getting into the area of, all right, there's this question is how helpful is this objective data now?
Yeah, look, I think it's really, really important. And I'm totally biased because I'm an educator and I love to teach people things. But I think it's really important that people understand why they're doing something. Like every person I've ever trained, clients I work with, I do think there's a ton of value in giving them the facts and the education and the knowledge. But then the other 90% of it is applying it to their life and how they're going to do that, and doing it in a way that is meaningful to them and also brings meaning to their life. And I think sometimes people get caught up in the perfect morning routine, the perfect this or that. And when you take a step back and you look at, are they doing things that are bringing meaning to their life still, or are you actually eliminating some of those important things to do these other things that you believe are important? This is not one patient I've had this scenario with, but now multiple. And I know other health coaches, the same thing, where we're having a conversation with somebody and they're like, I just had this conversation the other day, actually. I'm doing 3 days a week of zone 2. I'm strength training twice a week. I'm eating mostly whole foods or all whole foods. I'm tracking my food. I do sauna at night. I got cold plunge in the morning. I meditate 10 times a day. I'm walking. I'm doing sunlight in the morning. And I'm like, hold on, just stop for a second. Like, what do you do for fun? Like when do you spend time with friends, family? What are your social connections? And so I was having this conversation with a gentleman and I was like, hey man, like, let's pull back on some of that stuff, because the reality is, like, while we love sauna, there's tons of great benefits. We love cold plunging, great benefits, zone 2 cardio, all of these things, they're all stressors. And at some point, these stressors are now influencing your total anxiety and your stress levels and raising those up rather than fixing them. Whereas stepping back and realizing, hey, and I asked this guy the question, tell me what you believe is your favorite of all of these things. Which one do you enjoy the most? I love the sauna. Cool. Let's just do that. Let's just start there and just do that one thing and then layer things back in. And his whole scenario he was talking about here, his big challenge was his blood sugar kept elevating high. He's eating a ketogenic diet. Why would I have elevated blood sugar? And we're like, maybe there's some stress going on here. Maybe you're overstressing the system. His HRV was dipping low. As soon as he went down and said, okay, I'm going to focus on walking, a little bit of strength training, sauna, I'm going to eliminate the other stuff for a couple of days and report back to you. Within 2 days, he messaged me and he's like, my HRV is higher than it's ever been. I checked my blood sugar on the monitor. It's low. What the heck's going on? And I was like, you're inputting too many things. And it was a classic example of this health anxiety that we're talking about. And this is not just one person. I see this a lot.
Yeah. I mean, and I've seen it a lot too. And maybe it's something about the wild health population. We tend to have patients that are, really into stuff and pushing their limits in a lot of ways. Maybe more type A kind of personalities, people who are, more on the biohacker end of the spectrum in some cases. But I find that we end up pulling things away often more than we end up adding things.
Totally.
So how do you think about prioritizing what's worth incorporating into a routine? Like what's your approach to a rank order system of what's next and what to include?
Yeah, I think one of the obvious answers for us is, if the doctor sees a very objective health marker that we got to pay attention to this, if their fasting insulin is sky high, like we need to make that a big priority for sure for their health. But beyond that, it's looking at prioritizing things that are going to bring meaning to their life. And so just asking them that question, like, what are your values and your goals? What is your vision of health for you? What does that look like? What are the gaps that aren't getting you there? What are the things that you see that aren't getting you there? And digging into those things and making them, helping them, guiding them to understand that fun and social connections and time with friends and family are just as important as eating a good, healthy meal. They're just as important. And yeah, you can stack those things together, go eat a healthy meal with friends and family, but sometimes maybe you're going to go out to dinner and just enjoy a night of relaxation. And I always go back to that example that I said, where I was definitely not eating an optimal diet, definitely not sleeping optimally. And there was a lot of different things happening on a vacation. And I was more relaxed and probably had better biomarkers than ever to some regards. And you can certainly swing that too far for sure. But I think it's just a good lesson in understanding the importance of prioritizing the things that do bring meaning to your life. Like asking yourself the question, what are the things in my life that give me energy? And what are the things that take energy away? And trying to remove the things that take energy away. If trying to get 300 minutes of zone 2 cardio a week is just destroying your energy and stressing you out, then don't do it. Find another way. Let's compromise. Can you stack walking with a rucksack and talking to your wife? Whatever it is, like find ways to incorporate things that are both adding value to you as a person and to your life, and not adding stress, but hopefully taking it away.
Even if we do a great job of this and manage to pull some things away and prioritize those things that are most important, eventually people tend to find the internet. And when they do that, they
Yep.
find new and greatest and latest health trends and things that they're often curious about adding into their routine. Should I should I be doing this? Should I be, taking this supplement? Should I add in this particular type of HIIT training or sit training or whatever it is? We can obviously help them with that by, evaluating the resource, looking at the data, all those things. But what can our listeners do to help them discern between what we would consider, good, genuine health advice as opposed to just a trend that's not necessarily supported by the data? What can they do on their own to help figure that out?
Yeah, I love this question because this is the most common thing I think is I actually love when my patients, and I encourage them to go out and seek information and bring it back to us, because I do think one of our roles is to work in collaboration together as a team to help them sift through this stuff. But in terms of analyzing it yourself, I think, and I pride us in this because I do think we take this approach, is if somebody is giving you 100% absolutist statement, I would raise an eyebrow a little bit. I think the correct answer most times when people ask questions about things is, well, it depends. And that's not a cop-out. People sometimes take that as a cop-out, but I think it is, like when patients ask us questions all the time, I hear all of us very frequently say, well, it depends. Now, we have some additional data to help guide us, but it still depends, right? And I think that's the thing I always look for in information online. When I hear somebody saying something that sounds like I've never heard or sounds interesting, are they claiming it to be the only way? Because we know that's definitely not the case, especially in the nutrition world. Or are they saying, well, it depends on you, or it depends on your situation, or it depends on this or that, because everybody is different. And we're able to see that in some of our data, but it also is really important to guide them to doing things that they're actually going to be able to incorporate in their life. And if some of these extreme things they hear aren't going to match up with who they want to be, or how they're currently living, then it's not going to make sense to incorporate it. So I think that it's just a matter of asking yourself the question: is this person trying to sell me something? Is this person saying this is the only way, or are they saying, well, it depends?
Yeah, and it's important to point out too that it's not always that they're just trying to sell you something like an object. Sometimes they're just trying to sell you an idea too, because they're creating a brand or an image or something like that. And one really challenging thing with society today, in my mind, is how everything really almost has to be black and white. Otherwise, it's just not tolerable because people don't have the time to get into the weeds to like understand the nuance. So they just rather hear a yes or a no, or a black or a white, or a, only keto ever, or carnivore is the only answer, or you've got to be vegan or die. I mean, like, like these prophecies that people hold up as to like, how you should be living your life. And in reality, it's never that simple. So yeah, I feel like it depends should like be our slogan or something. So
we should put that on
marketing
some t-shirts. Add that to the mission statement.
Yeah, marketing
And it
would never let
depends.
us do that. But we could try.
No, but I do think it's important, just that allows people to, because it depends isn't the end of the answer, right? It's the start of the answer. Well, it depends, and here's why it depends. And then we talk about all the different things that it depends on, whether it's what kind of job you have, what time you have allotted for things. All of those follow-up questions matter when in trying to incorporate the thing you saw on the internet.
What about those people that have trouble in the in between? I know the people I'm talking about. I mean, I'm self-confessingly, I'm a little bit like that, in that I'm either all in or I'm not in at all. And sometimes that can be a tough mentality when it comes, or a tough mindset when it comes to choosing change that has longevity with it, right? Like it becomes this like yo-yo style of living your life where, you're crushing the CrossFit for 3 months and then you totally give up and you're not doing anything. And then you're back on to doing nothing but running. And then in the meantime, you're eating all keto or all vegan, and then you're switching back and forth. It's just these wide swings of yo-yo back and forth between different health activities. How do you help that person balance their lifestyle choices?
Yeah, I think it's important to analyze why they feel like they're continuing to search for something different. If this is a silly analogy, but I don't know why it always sticks in my head, is like, if you're trying to cook a really good steak the worst thing that you can do is cook it fast and poke it a lot, right? And like your health is kind of the same thing, right? Like if you're trying to chase something like a weight loss goal, or, modifying some biometrics in your lab work, a performance goal like getting your first pull up or something like that, you have to step back and understand that low and slow is the way to go. And is the more you start, if you're noticing some steady results on something, stay the course. Don't poke at it anymore. It's not going to make it go faster. And I think that's a really important lesson just to understand, and making sure to be honest with people. Like, let's agree to a time frame that you're going to work on this, helping them set a time frame, not just say, well, I'm going to focus on these diet changes and then talk to you in a month. It's like, okay, well, how long are you willing to focus on these? What sounds realistic to you too? Because that's going to be different for everybody. Some people are like, yeah, I can crush this for 3 months. Some people say, well, I'm probably only good for 2 weeks, and then let's circle back and see how it's going. You also have to look, when you're setting some of these goals and analyzing this long-term consistency, is, hey, what do you foresee getting in the way of this? What's coming up? The holidays are coming up. Okay, let's talk about how you can weave through that. And I think the other thing that I also like to make clear to people is, you don't have to be perfect. Like, you don't get a disease when you eat one bad meal. It happens with 1,000 in a row, maybe, but not one. And I think that taking a break and relaxing and enjoying those moments of life are also really important. The strategy I always use in my head is just don't do it twice in a row. If I am eating really great for breakfast, really great for lunch, maybe we take the kids out for pizza on a Friday night. Cool, let's have a good breakfast the next day. Maybe I don't wake up and have 5 Belgian waffles. Maybe I wake up and, have a good normal breakfast or something like that. And just allow myself to say, yeah, fell off the track a little bit today, or skip the workout today to sleep in a little bit more. Let's just not make it 2 days in a row. And you can jump right back into that habit. But every strategy works a little bit differently for everybody. And so it really, truly is a matter of figuring out what they believe. And sometimes you learn this over time, but what their time frame is for being able to hang on to something, because it's a little bit different for everybody. And you may need to set a more short-term goal and then reassess as you go along.
I think people underestimate how challenging it could be to allow that type of flexibility in your life. Like, so personal story. So I was overweight when I was a teenager and early 20s. Lost like 85 pounds between like 21 and 23. And to do that, I was just like ridiculously regimented. I mean, I wrote down every single calorie that I ate. I was doing like 2 a days in the gym. I didn't know what I was doing, by the way. I was just like, just eating very little calories and lots of working out. That's all I did. I like took a couple semesters on college and like actually like pulled back my coursework so I could like work out more. And like that worked. Right. And it got me to lose, 85 pounds. But the hardest part about all of that was actually finding a way to go on living my life, but living it in a semi-normal fashion. Right. Because I took this like, this like whatever, 10 months or whatever time frame it was for me to lose all that weight. And like, that was my singular objective. Like that was the thing I was going to do. Right. But then once you're there, and once you feel good about your weight, your body composition and everything, then now you've got to like live that. Right. And I can't go on living by eating, 1,300 calories a day or whatever crazy like caloric restriction I was eating, and working out, 2 hours a day. Like I gotta, get a job. I gotta like pay the bills. I gotta go out and socially hang out with friends and not be the person who's fasting for, a dinner at the local restaurant. So like figuring that part out can be really challenging. So it's really easy to do, to like you put yourself in this sort of like yo-yo situation, but the balance, the figuring out how to take this and turning it into life is the part that can be really challenging. And in a lot of ways where a coach can really step in and help out, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part, right? What you just described is the hardest part. People can dig in and commit to something for 30 to 60 or 90 days or a year or whatever it is and see the results. And then you have to sift through that puzzle of, okay, how does this fit into my life in a way that I can enjoy things still, and but still, stay up with my goals. And I do think this is where sometimes objective data can be an advantage. Like for me, I went down the paleo rabbit hole like 10 years ago, and I was like, okay, like white potatoes are evil, beans are poisonous, and I should only eat sweet potatoes and real food, and that's all I'm ever going to do. And I really did that a lot. And I was, going out to eat and wouldn't order certain things, or sometimes not even eat what was there and go somewhere else. And it became unsustainable and was creating more stress after some initial results from that. And it was like, okay, I need to figure out a strategy that's going to work. And I think some of it just came down to figuring out what my non-negotiables are in life. What are the things that matter to me most? And then where do my goals fit in with that I also have for myself, both physically and the objective data of my health report showing me that, hey, like carbs are actually your friend. You're doing pretty good. Your blood sugar's great. There's a lot of there's nothing major there. And just understanding, reassessing my blood work regularly is also like, it assures me that I'm on the path. You know, the Christmas binge I went on didn't ruin everything, right? Like we often perceive that it does, right? And I think that sometimes that is where objective data can be something that you can use as a tool for people as well, which is why I love that we are consistently reassessing blood work, because sometimes that's the assurance a person needs. We'll sit with them and say, hey, like your blood work's looking great. Like you're on the right track. I know you may sometimes feel like you're not, but you're moving in the direction. And that can be the motivation, because I mean, it's so true that like people will continue doing something if they are seeing results from that, whether it's objectively or subjectively, they'll continue on that path. And so I do think there is a place for that.
Yeah, you know, I don't think our patients really realize how quickly laboratory markers can change. So, you know, CRP can change in a matter of hours, right? So you could have a CRP yesterday that was 5.2, and then today it can be completely normal. Your lipids, when it comes to your LDL, those things change in a matter of a couple of days. Like if you're eating terribly, right? Then, and for whatever reason, you're eating a bunch of steak or cheese, and you've got the genetics that mean that your lipids elevate if you eat high saturated fat diets, you could go from, you know, a wildly abnormal LDL to completely in range in like 48 hours. So this idea that, you know, Christmas dinner is, you know, has completely destroyed your health for the next month is ridiculous. Like your body's going to rebound, right? And it rebounds actually pretty quickly. Like the body's a miraculous thing. It is the day after day, like consistency that leads to health. It's not the like wild, like, you know, flings of health. Like, you know, one day you work out 3 times and you sauna and you cold plunge and you, like, you know, take every single supplement known to man. That's not going to keep you healthy for a week. It's the consistency and the low level. What'd you call it earlier? Did you call it slow and low? Something like that. Like
Low and
that's
slow.
what we're looking for here.
Cooking it low and slow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't poke the steak too much.
We're sous vide in health here. That's what we're doing.
That's right. Yeah. You don't want to cook the steak too much and or poke it too much. I mean, and I think, you know, I'm stealing this from someone. I've seen this a million times, but it does resonate a lot with me this time of year. Is like, it's not really about what you did between Christmas and New Year's. It's what happens between New Year's and Christmas that really matters about your health, right?
Yeah, I like that one too.
And you can use that example for a lot of things, right? But I do think that mindset is a really important thing to understand. And what you explained with some of the objective data is really important, because the reality is a lot of people do care about that. And I don't need them to change that, but leveraging it in a way that they're not anxious about it and it's positively impacting them is a good way. Like showing them results that are showing them they're on the right path, or using a portion of your health report. Like for me, it was very eye-opening to learn how sensitive I was to eating late, and then objectively see that in my data immediately when I started watching that more carefully. And that's a very small habit that I'm able to really stick to consistently, because in the back of my mind, I see the data, I feel it subjectively, and I had, you know, a healthcare provider explain that to me. And so there's value in some of those things. And I think that's another thing, is like what we can bring to the table for people is helping them. I mean, like you said, more people come to us and we're removing things versus adding them. I think that's where we have some advantage to help this problem, is to sift through some of the noise and give them the 2 to 3 major levers that they can pull versus the 20 different things that they feel like they need to do. Because the reality is, my story about eating late isn't the same thing for everybody. Some people have some advantage to being able to do certain things. And it just is a matter of helping sort through those major things that you can do, and like not majoring in the minors, looking at the big rocks and tackling those things first.
100%. So what about you, Steve? You mentioned not eating late. What are some daily habits or rituals that contribute to your overall well-being and help you maintain that kind of balance in your life?
Yeah. So that was actually a really big one for me. A very simple thing was I love to snack late at night, and a bowl of popcorn and a movie sounds like a great thing. But
Mm-hmm.
seeing the difference in my sleep quality, both in data and then feeling more energy in the morning, was a big thing for me. And my genetics were just trash around that. So it all lined up for me, and that was what clicked. But some other very simple things, I've really embraced walking so much more than anything else. Just like getting away from the screens and just getting outside has been really valuable. And that's where I've sort of discovered between that and managing screen time, or is where I sort of discovered my own version of mindfulness. You know, I struggled a little bit with just like sitting and meditating, even using apps and things like that. But I find that I'm most mindful about things when I get the urge to scroll on my phone. And instead of just doing that, just pausing and like sitting with the uncomfortableness of that urge, and then maybe taking a walk or doing something else that isn't that, you know, and just trying to be present in that moment has been a big thing for me that I didn't really even realize was a thing I needed to focus on. And I think that has had such a major impact on just energy levels and just how you feel. I always felt like I carried around this sort of heaviness throughout the day that was just like, what is this thing around my head that I'm just carrying? And getting outside, living wild, breathing the fresh air makes a big difference and is a quick reset anytime I need it. And I think the last thing has just been leveraging protein a lot. That's been something that was a big eye opener for me. I chronically underate a lot, and that wasn't intentionally. It
Mm-hmm.
was just like you get busy doing things, or you're thinking about things a certain way. You're trying to focus on more uh, real foods than processed foods, and I realized like I am not fueling enough, and so just simply focusing on good quality protein throughout my meals throughout the day just increases my calories, increases my food, and I feel way better as a result, both in just energy and recovery um, from that. And then the last thing is probably just exercise. Like it's very much another piece to that mindfulness where I kind of find some peace and solace in finishing a workout and being kind of really tired and breathing really hard. Like that's sort of where I like find myself a little bit and I get my head clear. And that gives me most of the things I need for the day. And beyond that, like I try not to worry about too many things. I don't take a ton of supplements. I really only have things that I know I need based on my blood work. And I try not to get distracted because I have in the past of the new supplement. Let's look at this. Let's look at that. And really just trying to understand what I need for me that I can fit into my day that weaves into things more appropriately. And what all this has allowed me to do more than anything else is do the thing I really want to do, which is spend time with my family and have fun. And
Mm-hmm.
when I realized that there are things that I was doing in the past that took away from those things, removing those was a huge boost to everything. That was the linchpin to all things, was removing the things that got in the way of what I really wanted to do, which was have fun in life and be there for my family in whatever way.
You know, it's interesting. I feel like whenever I talk to someone who at least has the air of feeling like they're in a good place with their own health, if you ask them, you know, what did you do to get yourself in such a good place in terms of your health? Almost inevitably, one of the things that they mention has something to do with mental health. And you mentioned mindfulness and spending time with family, connection. You've used the word connection quite a few times. And I think that it feels like for whatever reason in our society, mental health and emotional well-being appears to be underappreciated as a driver for health. And I guess I'm definitely not burying the lead here. I have to clearly have an opinion here, but what's your experience like with mental and emotional health and its contribution to overall health? Do you
Yeah.
think it's important? If so, what sort of practices do you prioritize, or do you have your patients prioritize to sort of help with that aspect of well-being?
I think as far as importance goes, if you're picturing a pyramid here, and the different layers, you know, the bottom being most important, the top being the least important, I think it's at the bottom because I think it can be the linchpin to other things. It's really hard to be consistent with nutrition, with exercise, with anything else you want to do in life if you're not right with yourself and you don't have the emotional capacity to handle things. You don't have the mental resilience to handle different varieties of things. And so I think it's heart and soul to everything else. I think it can be the unlocking key to a lot of things people are experiencing. It's just making sure that you're managing those things, and as far as like strategies, it depends. But I do think that there are some really valuable things out there that people can utilize. One of them, for me, time and time again, is get outside. I don't know what it is about the indoors, and this time of year, I have to be more mindful of it. But if I just go outside for even 5 or 10 minutes, it's like just the weight is just lifted off my shoulders. And there's obviously some things there that we could talk about, and we have talked about before in previous podcasts, but that's a big thing. Spending more time outside, breathing fresh air, getting light, and just enjoying the outdoors a little bit more. Take your workout outside, take more walks, do things like that. As far as, mindfulness in general, it's so different for everybody. People have their own journeys around that. And for me, like I said, I don't really sit and meditate. It's not something I just tend to just drift and get distracted. And that's part of it. But for me, I find the most peace when I'm doing something that I enjoy. And that's when I'm the most clear, whether it's playing with my kids or finishing a hard workout or just outside walking around, is when I get that clarity where I can think through things. And I think the last thing I would say on all of this is, being a little bit more okay with getting uncomfortable at times. Like, we often tend to run from discomfort. And I found that even something as simple as like the discomfort of the urge I get to go on Instagram that pops up every now and then, and you want to go grab your phone and check that urge box. And when you don't do that, it is uncomfortable. Like, I don't think people realize, like, pause for 30 to 45 seconds before you do that and just sit in the discomfort for a bit. And when you do that, you can then talk about or think about, why am I experiencing this? What am I feeling? Maybe name some of those feelings and then move forward with whatever you need to do at that point. But sitting and understanding and talking to those feelings a bit, I think, is where I make the most progress on anything. It's just naming them and recognizing them and being honest and open about them.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're running up on time here. Let's see if we can summarize this for everybody. What are a few takeaways that we can take from this conversation about managing health anxiety?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest things for people to think about, number one, if you're noticing that you're experiencing extreme health anxiety around certain things, sometimes it can help just to get educational clarity on those things from a coach, from a doctor, from somebody that you trust. Have somebody in your corner that you can set goals with that are realistic, because oftentimes some of the health anxieties are around unrealistic goals. And it's helpful to have somebody to bounce ideas off of, like a coach, to be able to sift through whether this is a realistic goal or something that isn't totally realistic for you at this time. And we need to reassess that a little bit, and then I think, the last thing is just a good self-awareness that, what we talked about earlier, that it's not always about the latest and greatest supplement, the perfect diet, the best exercise routine, but we have to be mindful of those connections that we make with others, and whatever that might be. You don't have to be the most social person of all time, but having a tribe or having people that are around you that can support you and that you can turn to is an important aspect of making your HRV better, improving your blood glucose, like all of those things that I don't think people often fully realize, that that's as big of a linchpin as the other things that we often talk about. And as soon as you can incorporate that in and then balance them with the help of somebody, I think you can make some really steady progress here.
Well said. Well said. Steve Weatherholt, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, man.
Yeah, it was fun.
All right. Have a good day. See you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Wild Health Podcast. If you're a Wild Health patient, you might not know, but you have access to our referral program. This gets your friends and family 25% off Wild Health services. Just head to Clarity, and in the top right corner, you'll see Refer a Friend. Click there, and you'll be brought to a page with your referral code. Happy sharing.